Great day, everyone. I hope that today has been amazing for you. I am excited to be live with you all again. I have a special treat for you. I am sitting down with a former client who has now turned to friend to have a conversation, a very important conversation about being a woman in leadership. And not only that, but being a woman of color and some of the challenges that we face as it relates to the workplace when we are trying to navigate the sphere of a majority Caucasian influenced or dominated environment. Let me just bring her to the stage. So Veronica, hey
Hello.
girl, hey,
Hi, Trisetta.
how are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be having this conversation. We've been talking about doing this for a while.
Yes, we have. Finally.
I know. I appreciate your patience. I know not getting our schedules to jive was a bit of a challenge, but we're here now.
Yeah,
We're here now.
we're here now. Yes.
Well, before we dive in, why don't you tell the people just a little bit about yourself, who you are, and kind of a little bit of your background, your story.
Well, she said, my name is Veronica Degraff. I am the owner of Silver Lining Consulting, LLC. My background is varied, but I'd say the last 10 plus years I've been in human resources. And for the human resources professionals out there, we know how exciting that can be.
Listen, going through COVID, I know you all had, I know you all
Oh my
had some
goodness.
serious challenges trying to pivot and navigate all of the nuances that went along with the stay-at-home orders and trying to keep staff safe and all that. So yeah, I'm sure, I'm sure that
Absolutely.
was a bit of a doozy. So it's all
Yeah.
good. It's all good.
Talk about on the job training.
Right.
Learn
Listen,
as you go.
everyone was getting some on the job training. I think the beautiful thing about that though was we were all going through it together.
Yes.
So people were
Yes.
a lot more understanding about missteps or mishaps because it was just like we don't know what we're doing. Like this is uncharted territory.
Yes.
And but you know what? I feel like a lot of life is like that, and especially navigating the workplace
Hmm.
as women, so,
Yes.
women and women of color specifically, is
Absolutely.
is extraordinarily challenging. I think partially because we don't have a long-standing history
Hmm.
of being in leadership and being in the workforce in a professional environment in that way, right?
Yes.
If you go back just a few decades,
Hmm.
Black women primarily were domestic workers, right?
Yes.
And what we might consider to be unskilled laborers. And
Hmm.
now we are some of the most highly educated
Yes.
people in the US because we are getting degrees at a rate much higher than that of our white and male counterparts.
Yes.
So yeah, so this is a really important conversation, and to kind of set the stage, y'all, for why we're having this chat. Veronica attended an event for primarily women,
Hmm.
women leaders, and she was sharing with me kind of that experience and some of the topics and conversations that were had at in one session in particular was a panel session, and she was talking
Hmm.
about the lack of representation there, and that there was some advice that was being given that while it would work for our lighter our lighter sisters may
Yes.
not necessarily work for us who are a little bit more melanated,
Yes.
and that the event producer, event host kind of missed an opportunity there. And since my audience, I primarily work with women leaders, And kind of that's Veronica's sphere as well. And here, this, I felt like this was I was like, well, let's have that conversation then,
Yes.
like, let's kind of recreate the scene and address all the things that didn't get addressed at that particular event. And I want to kind of like start off from, I'm going to come in hot with it. I'm going to come in.
Bring it on.
I'm going to come in hot with it because I think one of the most common things that women of color have to deal with in the workplace is like coming off as the angry Black woman, right? When she is just simply trying to be an advocate for what is right for her, right?
Yes.
We have to experience all these like microaggressions. And when we try to address them, then again, like we come off as just being aggressive or being angry or being mean. And that's not that's really not the case. We just want to be treated fairly.
That's right.
So from your perspective, how could a woman of color leader, or even just, a professional, she didn't have to be a leader, but how can women of color advocate for themselves, in the workplace, in the corporate sphere, without being seen by her colleagues as aggressive?
And that's a great question. And I think one of the things I want to start off by saying about that is, regardless sometimes of how we come across, it's possible we could still be seen as coming across as aggressive or as the angry Black woman. But I think it truly goes back to knowing who you are, knowing your worth, knowing what you bring to the table. And when you truly know yourself and your value, your worth, what your contribution is, you can then articulate that to the other person. So I know there are some times when you're not as confident in yourself as you think you may be, and someone can say something to trigger something, and that aggression might come out where you find yourself defending yourself. So it truly just kind of goes back to knowing who you are. And that comes with spending time with yourself, comes with, as I've learned from journaling, from asking yourself the tough questions, introspection, and that prepares you for those off the wall questions that may come where you would maybe respond in a not so friendly manner, so to speak, or come off as being aggressive or the angry Black woman. That confidence will help you get that across in a more milder way.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And, being able to have those conversations with self,
Yes.
through, stream of conscious journaling or using some sort of prompt. It doesn't really matter, but, being able to have that introspection really does help you to know thyself, right?
Yeah.
To know thyself so that you can recognize kind of what your triggers are. And I think it's also important to note that because, and let me disclaimer here, I'm not using this as an excuse, right? This is not excuse when we are kind of in attack mode and or defense mode and we're like, claws come out. But I think it's important to really understand that women of color have to deal with so many of these little small microaggressions.
Yes.
Over time, we're kind of naturally on the defense. We're naturally on edge because we're so accustomed to people coming at us.
Yes.
From a place of negativity or from a place of attack, that even when we're not being attacked, our response still kind of comes from that place. Kind of think of it like almost like PTSD,
Yes.
right? It's it's almost like PTSD because like, you if you think about like a wounded uh animal, like specifically
Yes.
like a wounded dog or
Mhm.
like a wolf or a tiger, just
Yes.
one of the a large cat, right? And you're going in to try and help it. Its natural response is gonna
Yes.
be to like kind of sneer at you or growl at you or
Exactly. To
try
protect
to
itself.
right. It's going to protect itself because it doesn't
Yes.
know that you're there to help.
To
And
help.
I think that that's one of the causes.
Mhm.
Like I said, I'm not trying to excuse. We still need to
Not at
have
all.
that. We're talking about that introspection
Yes.
and be reflective and recognize what type of things trigger and
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
automatically assume what
Exactly.
people's and motives are for whatever it is that they're
Yeah.
saying, because it could be completely innocent.
I think that
But
that's where it comes with you spending time with yourself, recognizing that, say, someone's going to listen to this and say, okay, yes, I understand the wounded animal, and someone tries to pet it, but it leaps out at you like you're trying to hurt it. So then that comes back to you, taking a deep breath. You're going into a meeting, or you're going to see someone that can really push your buttons. They're going to say something that's really going to tick you off. So you're already mentally prepared. You're in the bathroom, you're taking deep breaths, you're talking to yourself, you're talking to yourself because you're getting ready to go in the ring.
listen.
Yes, so you're preparing and you're putting your shield on. So
Yeah,
those
yeah.
little they can bounce off. That's easier said than done, but it has to be a conscious effort um, to to help dispel that angry Black woman and that aggression, that or aggressiveness that
Yeah, yeah. It's so, oh my gosh, I was having flashbacks when you were talking about that. I remember this was years ago. I shoot, that was like 20 years ago. I
wow.
was 22 years ago. I
Mhm.
was working for this company, this medical equipment company, and one of my colleagues just and this was a fellow woman of color, but I got promoted. We started a day after each other and I got promoted rather
Mhm.
quickly.
Mhm.
And after I got promoted, she was not happy with me.
Yes.
And she would do things, she would say things, right, to antagonize me. She would
Mhm.
say things in earshot,
Yes.
essentially like, oh, who does she think she is? And whatever the case was, right? And
Yes.
it took everything in me to remain professional. And Veronica, I would literally sit in my car when I would pull up in the morning. I would sit in the
Yep.
car for a minute and I would literally pray and be like, Lord, let the words of my heart and I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh, words in
and
my
let
mouth.
the words of my mouth and the
Yes.
meditation of my heart
Um,
be acceptable in your sight. Yeah.
Otherwise, it won't be.
Listen, listen, I had to do that every single day before going in
Yes.
that office. And then
Yes.
finally, like it got to the point where I was like, I can't take this. It was months. And I had gotten to the place where I was just like, I can't take this anymore. And then my prayer started to shift. I still said that prayer, but then I also started saying, I'm like, Lord, either move her or move me.
Mhm.
I don't know how much
Mhm.
longer I can
Yes.
stay um, in this type of posture without defending myself.
Yes. Exactly.
And one day she
Wow.
just stopped. And all was good after that. But it's not I bring that up to
Mhm.
illustrate how, like what it may look like in practice and how it's not easy and it's not something that you can only do one time.
Yeah.
But then also that to illustrate that it doesn't always come from our counterparts.
Yeah.
Sometimes it comes from within the house.
That's right.
I'll say it that way.
Yes, absolutely.
Sometimes it comes from within the house, which I didn't really plan on us kind of going here, but I think
Mhm.
now that we are,
Yeah.
um, have you ever had that type of experience? Like what kind of advice would you give to someone who's experiencing that kind of aggression from just, from someone who looks like them?
That's a hard one. Um, you want to try to understand them. Say it's better to be understood. It's better
Hmm.
to understand than be understood. I think that's the way the saying goes, and that can work with some people. But we as women of color, we can be brutal to each other sometimes. I mean, we really can. I mean,
Yeah.
um, if that person is someone that you can have a conversation with, I personally have tried to do that. I know there's a little tension between us. Is it something we can work out? Can we talk about it? Um, Sometimes it goes over. Sometimes it's like it's just best to agree to disagree. I'll see you in the hall and say hello or not, and keep walking. Um, so that's a tough one.
Yeah, it is. Back then, and I was very conflict averse.
Mhm,
So I didn't attempt to have a conversation with her. But if I were in that type of situation now,
mhm.
then I would attempt to bring, because I'm not as conflict averse now, and I have
Mhm.
a much greater understanding of kind of the motivations, if
Yes.
you will,
Mhm.
between, some
Yes.
of the motivations behind, that's the word I was trying to
Yes.
say. Some of the
Yes.
motivations behind behaviors that it's generally not about the person who it is being projected onto. It's about something going on within the other
With that
person. And if
person.
you can
Absolutely.
allow that part of the person to be seen and
Mhm.
heard,
Mhm.
then you can provide a little bit of healing and navigate that. Not always, but the
Yeah.
majority of the time, I would say that you can do that.
Yes. And back to the conversation part. Sometimes you can have a conversation and it comes out, "Oh, well, I thought you thought this. Well, I thought
Mhm.
you thought this." And then you both end up thinking something totally different, and you laugh about it, and a relationship develops from that.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely. Absolutely. Communication is really the cornerstone
mhm.
of productivity in the
Yes.
workplace. Well, in relationships, in any type of relationship, whether it's with a colleague or a personal relationship, professional or personal
Mhm.
relationship. Again, another scenario, I had an employee who I had recently been promoted again. Right, here's
Mhm.
another, I was a but this was years later, but I
Mhm.
had been promoted, and he was struggling with my wanting to hold him accountable. My style, I'll say it that way, my style of leadership, my style of managing was
Mhm.
much different than what he was accustomed to,
Mhm.
and he was struggling with that and felt it as a personal attack
Wow.
against him, and we ended up having to bring in HR. Right,
Wow.
we brought in HR as a liaison, as a mediator, to
Yes.
have conversation. And once we sat down at the table and he kind of shared from his perspective, like what was
Mhm.
going on, what was really causing him to feel so attacked, for lack of a better word.
Wow.
And discovered, I'm like, that's not it at all.
That's not it at
I'm like,
all.
no,
Exactly.
that's not. I'm
Yes.
like, no, I'm on your side. Like
Yes.
I'm here to, and even in that conversation, somebody, one of the people who was in that mediation with us
Mhm.
said something incorrectly about his performance,
Mm.
and I had an opportunity to step up and protect him, like, no, that's not the case, and go to bat for him in
Mhm.
in that conversation, so that he was able to really see that, listen, I'm
Absolutely.
on your side, I'm on your
Yes.
team, I'm not here
Yes.
to attack you, I'm not trying to get rid of you or anything, I'm trying to draw the best out of you and make sure
Absolutely.
that we serve the students that we're here to serve. that we serve them
Absolutely.
to the best of our ability, right? And so those misunderstandings are very easy to happen,
Mhm. Mhm.
and being willing to have some open communication and
Yes.
drop the pride,
Yes.
right? Like drop the pride and be like, oh, well, I didn't do anything wrong. It's like,
Yeah.
just because you didn't say anything wrong or do anything wrong,
Mhm. Mhm.
when someone is not in that right space,
Mhm.
it's important for you to go to them and try to
Yes.
make things right. I imagine with your background in HR that you've probably had to facilitate these types of conversations before, mediate these types of conversations before. Have you?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes, I have.
um, how often were these conflicts based on misunderstandings or misinterpretation?
Misunderstandings. Um, there were a few. Let me just put it that way. Because usually when if it comes up where two people need to get together and we need to have a conversation, I'll usually start by saying something it has come to my attention
Hmm.
and to open it up. And so they start talking and things start being shared and you can see the expression on the other person like, what? And so then how that's when it's like, oh, okay, it's not what was really thought. The other person starts talking and like you say, it's like there's this miscommunication going
Yeah,
on. And so we can kind of get to the bottom of this person is not really doing this, to spite you or to hurt you, or they're trying to, in this particular case, they're trying to do their job. And
yeah,
I'll say for one example with mine, this person's needed to train someone and the other person thought they were trying to take their job. And that wasn't it at all. So we got all that out on the table. No one's trying to take your job, but you do need to train this person. And we made nice. They made
yeah,
nice. And everybody went on with what needed to be done. But it took a conversation to do that.
yeah. Well, okay. So what about when you have those scenarios where either you can't have the conversation um, for fear of retribution or retaliation, or you attempt to have the conversation and it's not received well, um, or there's a higher up covering that will not hold that person accountable to uh, doing better. I'll say it that way.
Oh my
To,
gosh. Whew,
to
that's
doing
a
better.
whole nother
Right. That's a conversation for another day.
that's a
But
conversation for another day. But
yeah,
but I
but
will say,
how can you be how can you be resilient? How can you come back from that? How can you still continue to show up? Because let's assume that this is a job that you
mhm,
really enjoy, that you love,
yes,
and you want to stay there, you want to be there.
yes,
But how do you avoid kind of disengaging as
yeah.
a result of what's happening?
Oh, wow. Um, Kind of going back to number one about knowing yourself, knowing your worth, knowing your value, spending time with yourself. I mean, to be resilient means to come back from something, how quickly you bounce back. So when you're
Mhm.
in a situation like that, it is very important that um, you're practicing some self-care
Mm,
because
okay.
nothing in, nothing out. So if you're not taking care of yourself, you cannot withstand all the negativity, all the misunderstandings that's coming your way on a daily basis. So when you take the time to take care of yourself and pour back into you, spending that time with yourself, as I say, you eating right, exercising, drinking enough fluids, and all that good stuff. Um, then you can be more resilient. You can get up and go in the next day because you'll have a better resolve to deal with it. Um, I personally have had to deal with that myself.
Yeah.
Um, and how do you
Likewise.
keep doing it? Yeah, day after day. Because I spent time with myself. I know what I bring to the table. I know my value. I know my worth. And so, although I have to go into the ring. I call it the ring every day. I'm ready.
Yeah.
I've did what I need to do to withstand what's coming my way. And that started with self-care. And also in my case, I got a coach, you, to help
What?
me answer some of those questions, to help me filter through some of that, to help me navigate some of those things that I was going to. So it really does. Self-care is a big one, and it's so
Yeah.
cliche. Oh, self-care.
Yeah.
But that can be as simple as um, taking an evening to yourself and having some tea or some, a glass of wine, or just listening to some music, or just sitting
Mm-hmm.
in quiet to give yourself time to reset so you can go back and face the music the next day. And there's a saying that, and I don't know who said it, it's not mine, but it says, day by day, nothing seems to change. Pretty soon, everything is different. I truly believe that if you're going through something on your job and you're facing it every day, prayer works. Prayer works. Like you said, move you or move that person. I have prayed for God to bless somebody with a job that was out of this world, or give me a job that's out of this world. But yeah, so we can't go it alone. Again, that self-care is, you got to have something to believe in, to depend on, someone to lean on in a spiritual way to keep you strong.
Yeah. The support is really important.
Yeah.
And, yeah, you can, hire someone like me to support you through professional challenges, because it's, it all comes down, you talked a lot about self-care throughout our conversation, which is like one of my huge conversations, because I believe that you can be successful in life and in your career and in your business simultaneously. It
Yes.
comes down to really prioritizing the things that matter most. And you are the most important
Yeah.
aspect of your life, because
Yeah.
without you, you have, if if you don't take care of you, then you
Yeah.
might find yourself no longer here. But
Absolutely.
self-care goes beyond, Netflixing and chilling and spa
That's right.
days and whatnot. You really have to get into those deeper elements, that introspection that we've talked
Yeah.
about a couple of times, the
Mm-hmm.
spiritual aspects, whether, both of us, we both have that Christian foundation, but
Yes.
whatever your spirituality um, elements are, or spiritual
Mm-hmm.
practices are, really,
Yeah.
leaning into that, finding a network of support, having people
Yes.
who are in your corner that you can have deep, meaningful conversations with about
Yes.
what you're experiencing in the workplace. Um, and it's, a safe space for you to
A
have those
safe space.
conversations,
Absolutely.
so that you can offload it in a healthy manner, so that you don't blow up in the
Yes.
workplace and really feed into more
Absolutely.
that perception of,
Yes.
the angry Black woman, right? and
Yeah.
and of course, I'm saying angry Black woman because, as Black women, that's what we have, but we're talking in
Yeah.
more general terms around, like, women of color in general.
Yes.
But that terminology is just so pervasive
Yes.
in
Yes.
culture, especially here in the U.S. I can't speak for any other country, because I don't live
Mm-hmm.
in any other
Yeah.
country. But here
Absolutely.
in but here in the U.S., it is definitely
Yes.
a, a hot topic.
It is.
What um, what we're winding things down here. We barely even scratched the
We barely
surface.
even scratched the surface.
We're just getting we're just getting going. Good. We're gonna have to come back and have another conversation. And so I want to
Absolutely.
invite those of you who are tuning in live, drop in the comments any questions that you might want to ask Veronica around, navigating the workplace as a woman of color, and, dealing with those really sensitive issues that come up
Yes.
in the workplace, drop those in the comments, and I will make note of them and come back with with a part two where we can
Yes.
actually get a chance to dig into some of the comments, some of the questions that people have around these topics. Because I know one of the things that I want to talk about is kind of like, you know, the imposter syndrome. I feel like it is, I
Oh
feel
my
like
goodness.
that's something that's major that comes up, especially, and I think all people experience it, but I think that it's a lot
Yes.
more prevalent in women of color.
Yeah.
Um,
And there
now, don't
again,
quote me, like I'm not an expert. I haven't done any research on that. This is very anecdotal, right?
I
From
know.
my perspective, but
Yeah.
the imposter syndrome, the glass ceiling, the
Yes.
glass cliff, right? Like there's the pay gap,
Yes. All of that.
between not just men and women, but even white women versus women of color, black
Yes.
women specifically, right? There's a whole host of topics that really should be discussed,
Yes.
so
Absolutely.
that we can shed light on some of the challenges that we face as women, and specifically women of color
Yeah.
in the workplace, especially when you're aspiring to leadership roles, or walking through leadership roles. And that's another thing. It's like, how do we
Yes.
reach back, as women leaders? Because I know that's one of the things that we talked about. You have a
Yeah.
desire to reach back and mentor and bring other women of color along and help them
Yes.
to navigate through
Yes.
kind of some of the pitfalls and the minefield that can be,
That can be a minefield in itself.
right, right,
Trying to reach back. That's another uh, topic for another time. But
yeah. So, like I said, that we just barely scratched the surface. But I wanted to keep this short, so we'll definitely come back and do a part two. But again,
awesome.
drop any questions that you may have in the chat, and we will be sure to answer those. Veronica, thank you so
Yes.
much for sitting down with me and having this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. So, um, I appreciate you. You're
Yes.
amazing.
I appreciate you as well. I look forward to the
Well,
next one.
yeah, likewise, likewise. Well, all right, we're gonna wrap things up. That's all we have for you today. We will come back with a part two and dive a little deeper into some additional topics. But as I always say, take care of yourself and each other. I'll
Yes.
see you next time. Have an amazing rest of your day.
Thank you.